Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. Next we have Inez Seranno, and she's the one character who early on realizes the condition that they're in. So in many ways, she's trading off between her and Garcin the role of narrating what's truly going on behind the scenes. For her, it's just a suspicion, and it might come out of her own character and what she's projecting onto the world, because she is, rather sadistic. And that lends to her a certain, you might say, paranoia, expecting everybody else to be persecuting her in turn. What we can say about her is that she's a post office clerk, in contrast to the well-off Estelle. She's a lesbian, and this comes out very, very early on. She was in this relationship with this woman, Florence. That we'll discuss in just a moment. And what Sartre does a particularly good job in portraying with her is that when it comes to sexual desire, she feels desire for Estelle. And there's interesting ways in which this is brought out without getting pornographic or even really too explicit. But she also feels a kind of disgust for Garcin and his mannishness. And Garcin, by the way, is the one who Estelle, who Inez desires. She's desiring Garcin, and they almost get it on in front of her. And she's talking, about how disgusting she's finding it at the time. By her own admission, she's cruel. She's a torturer. She's sadistic. She has this desire for Estelle, but, does she have a desire for Estelle because she really cares about Estelle? Perhaps not. What's interesting about her desire is that it carries through all the revelations that Estelle makes about who she is. All three of these people realize that they are rotten to the core, to use their own words. And yet she still desires Estelle. She has a feeling for her. And she is the one who realizes their condition. As opposed to Garcin, who says, I can use all this time to sort of put my life in order. Inez will say, well, everything's put in order for me. There's nothing for me to think about. Now the only question is, what am I going to do with this eternity of time in front of me? Let's look at a few passages that I think are particularly important or revelatory. So as soon as she gets in the room, she thinks that Garcin is going to be the torturer. And Garcin says, that's too comic for words. Come on in, have a good look at me. And he says, now that we've broken the ice, do you really think I look like a torturer? By the way, how does one recognize torturers when one sees them? Evidently you've got ideas on the subject. Inez says, they look frightened. And you might say that's a flip comment on Sartre, it's an easy thing to throw in at a time when torture was, in fact, going on in many places. It's the sort of, typical thing that an intellectual would say about that. They don't really have guts. He's not going there with this. Garcin says, frightened? But how ridiculous. Of whom should they be frightened? Of their victims? And Inez says, laugh away. But I know what I'm talking about. I've often watched my face in the glass. And there's nothing more said there. But what's being hinted at? The one who is cruel to the other person actually is worried about how the other person is going to react, how they're perceiving them. Maybe they're even shocked at what they do to the other person and what the other person endures. A little bit later on, Inez is the one who's willing to sort of call a spade, and she says, "Yes, we are all criminals, murderers, all three of us. We're in hell, my pets. They never make mistakes, and people aren't damned for nothing." And Estelle doesn't want to hear this. She says, "Stop, for heaven's sake." And Inez says, "In hell, damned souls, that's us, all three." And Estelle says, "Keep quiet, I forbid you to use such disgusting words." Why talking about disgusting words at that point? Meaning words that we don't want to hear. We don't want to recognize the situation that we're in. And Inez says, "A damned soul, that's you, my little plaster saint, and ditto our friend here, the noble pacifist. We've had our hour of pleasure, haven't we? There have been people who burned their lives out for our sake, and we chuckled over it. We didn't appreciate the sacrifice that was made." Notice that she's not just saying that what's bad is that they had other people burn their lives out for their sake, but that they chuckled over it. They didn't appreciate it. They even, in Garcin's case, made light of it. So now we have to pay the reckoning. And then she says, "I understand now. I know why they've put us three together." This is a question that they're concerned with throughout the play in the early part. And she says, "You'll see how simple it is, childishly simple. Obviously there aren't any physical torments, and yet we're in hell, and no one will ever come here. We'll stay in this room together, the three of us, forever and ever. In short, there's someone absent here, the official torturer." So she says, it's obvious what they're after. An economy of manpower, or devil power, if you prefer. It's the same idea as the cafeteria, where customers serve themselves. And Estelle says, "What do you mean?" And Inez says, "I mean that each one of us will act as the torturer of the two others." So she's realized the condition that they're in. She'll talk in other places about each of them being traps laid for the others. For example, because she desires Estelle, Estelle is a trap for her. She can invest her time, her attention, even if she can muster it up, her love, and by doing so, she'll be laying herself in for greater disappointment, greater pain, greater humiliation. And she says to Garcin, there's traps laid for you as well. Each one of us has traps laid for us here that will cause us to be frustrated, cause us to be humiliated, cause us to be confronted with our own condition, who we are, and we'll be confronted with the fact that others are actually seeing us as we are and not happy with it. That we can't, if we say it in very crude terms, we can't put any BS over them. We can tell it to ourselves, but it won't work while they're in the room. She is the one who's probably the most conscious of the presence of the others. She tells Garcin at a certain point that, even if you're quiet, I can hear you over there thinking. This is what we call intentionality in philosophy and phenomenology in particular. And Sartre is putting into Inez's mouth a great speech about intentionality. When we perceive that, even if another doesn't speak, we can perceive their attitudes, we can perceive their intentions, and sometimes we can misperceive these, but very often we can sort of peer into them, at least to a certain depth, sometimes seeing things that they themselves are unaware that they're projecting. Inez is painfully conscious of that. She can't get away from that. Now, how did she end up there? Here's her story. She says, why am I down here? Well, I was what some people down there call a damned bitch, damned already, so it's no surprise being here. She's very cynical, she's unhopeful, she's despairing. And then Garcin says, is that all you have to say? And she says, no, there was an affair with Florence, a dead man's tale, with 3 corpses to it. He to start with, then she and I. So there's no one left. I have no one to worry about. It was a clean sweep. Only that room, I see it now and then, empty with the doors locked. And then, she goes on, and Garcin says, did the man kill himself? And she says, he? No, he hadn't the guts for that. Still, he had every reason. We led him a dog's life. As a matter of fact, he was run over by a tram, a silly sort of end. I was living with them. He was my cousin. So what she's done is she's seduced her cousin's wife or girlfriend, and they're sort of, flaunting their affair in front of him. And, apparently at one time she was sort of okay with the cousin, but then she says, I got sick of him, quite gradually. All sorts of little things got on my nerves. For instance, he made a noise when he was drinking, a kind of gurgle. Trifles like that. He was rather pathetic, really. Vulnerable. That shows you, for Inez, if you show weakness, if you show vulnerability, she will go on the attack because that's the kind of person that she is. She tells us this a little bit later. She says, when I say I'm cruel, I mean I can't get on without making people suffer, like a live coal in others' hearts. When I'm alone, I flicker out. For 6 months, I flamed away in her heart till there was nothing but a cinder. One night, she got up and turned on the gas while I was asleep. Then she crept back into bed, so now you know. So they got her cousin to go out into the street and get run over by a passing tram. And then she just picked and picked and picked at her lover until her lover killed both of them by turning on the gas and going to bed. So Inez, this is what she thinks got her down in hell. But she thinks that she was ready for hell to begin with because of the kind of person that she is. And it's in part because she doesn't have a lot of illusions, because she sees reality as rather unvarnished, although she's probably projecting the hostility that she feels towards others onto others and receiving it back. She's the one who's immediately able to say, here's the problem, here's the trap that we're stuck in. We're going to be torturing each other. And when they say, no, I won't be doing that sort of thing, she says, well, I will, and I bet you will too. Because you're not as good as you think, and after a little while with me, you're probably going to want to torture me back too. At the same time, there is one moment where late on in the play, she trusted Garcin about something, and perhaps she's just sort of putting on, she's just engaging in an argumentative move, but perhaps she really is showing a moment of real vulnerability, where Garcin has promised that he will help her. Now she's, sort of thrown that back in his face. And then he responds to Estelle, who's trying to seduce him for her own ends, and says, I'm going to go along with this. And she says, you promised me. You promised. And he says, well, you went back on your promise first. There is the one moment where she appears to be really hurt to the core. All the rest of the time, she's more or less frustrated and disgusted. She would like to have Estelle all to herself, and she sort of thinks that were Garcin not in the picture, she could eventually bring Estelle around. Probably not the case, given that they're in hell, but that's one of the things that's motivating her. She admits that she herself is a coward when Garcin says, you and I have something in common. So what we've got here in Inez is somebody who has many fewer illusions than the other two, but has many fewer illusions because she recognizes just what a bastard she is. The third